Hello and welcome back to the Film Club, the club where we just talk about films that we've been recently watching, enjoying, viewing. Let me know in the comments what you've been watching, and if you've seen the film I'm about to talk about, let me know what you thought about it. I've never been a huge fan of the Mission Impossible films, but they've always been enjoyable. But when I saw the Dead Reckoning Part 1 trailer, I was actually really excited. I think this film looked very interesting, the action sequences looked brilliant, the stakes felt high, although they kind of always do in Mission Impossible films, and to my surprise, I really enjoyed this film. And really enjoyed this film. To say the length of this film, it went by in an instant. So we start the film on a submarine who have this like AI supercomputer called the Entity, which they think is a weapon, which ends up actually turning against them and destroying itself or trying to destroy the submarine that it's on. To control this computer, you need two parts of a key that connect together, and that's essentially the whole story of this film, trying to get the two keys so that they can control or shut down this entity. To be honest, they did a really good job of dealing with this. Having an AI supercomputer as the main bad guy is quite a hard concept to do. You run the risk of having it quite cringy and maybe stereotypical, or like having someone represent it on like a computer screen or something like that. But they actually did it really well, and I think it worked really well. Having people as almost followers of the Entity, I think, is a brilliant concept. I'd love to know a little bit more about the Entity, you know, how it got to these people, how it like reached out to them or anything like that. I do think that's one thing that the film could have done a little bit more, use the Entity a little bit more as like a showing it come up as a message or something like that. It's got presence in the film, don't get me wrong, they go to the party and it's got like the symbol and things like that, but overall I would have liked to see it spark up a little bit more in places. This film is just non-stop action. There are a couple talking scenes that split up the action, but you can tell that they were really just going for these big, massive action set pieces. And while some of them do feel a little bit drawn out and they could be shortened, I actually think it gives space for mistakes and for it to be a little bit more realistic and slower and not so bang that a lot of action films are. I think the car chase around Rome was just absolutely fantastic, using comedy elements of the two characters being handcuffed together and having not such a great car. The comedy in this film lands, and it really works. I loved like the different elements of the fact that this car chase, you have Tom Cruise and his people, you've got police, you've got American people after them, you've got the Entity's people after them, and just all these different people are coming from all these different places, and I just think that was brilliant. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, but Pom, who plays Paris, was actually such a brilliant highlight of this film for me. Like, every time she was on screen, it was just a brilliant concept of this, like, absolutely crazy girl who looks so sweet and innocent, but just really isn't. She did a great job with the part, and I loved seeing her in this. The next action sequence is when they go to a party, and the stakes are pretty high. You've got the reveal that the Entity says that one of these two women are going to die. And at first, you sort of want to not believe it, because you think, oh, Tom Cruise is going to save the day. But as it keeps going, these two women keep getting closer and closer to death. The stakes of Tom Cruise absolutely bolting it through Venice, and then to find out she was stabbed and it was true. That is such a brilliant power play, and it shows the Entity as like, okay, this knows what it's doing. The entire final sequence of the train is just brilliant, like bit after bit, different. It was so good. Well, I do think Tom Cruise going off a bike off a cliff, and it wasn't needed, if I'm entirely honest. They didn't need to do it. Was it good for marketing? Yes, they got to show that Tom Cruise is doing these crazy stunts. I get that. But if I hadn't seen all the marketing and just everything behind it, to be honest, I would have just thought that this was CGI or done by a stuntman. And so I do think this was pretty much just purely for marketing. But don't get me wrong, it was cool to see Tom Cruise fly off a cliff with a bike. Just all the different fights on the train. You have the ones on the roof, and then you have the different people getting involved. You have the ones inside. You have the tension of the train not being able to stop. You have the tension of Grace being undercover and them not knowing about it. And then when the line explodes and the train goes, oh, Jesus Christ. It was one of them where you were like, oh, tense, and then you're like, oh no, he's safe. No, not again. The way that like the carriages would just slowly slip in, like one by one, was just, I loved it. As always, with pretty much every Mission Impossible film I've seen, Simon Pegg is an absolute highlight for me. He just smashes the role, every single bit of it. It's a perfect character for me, and it's perfect because of Simon Pegg. I understand why they did it in part 1 and part 2 now, because it did allow them to draw out these action fights and action sequences and allow more space for a bit more realism, rather than just trying to cram it into a 10-minute action sequence. It was instead a 20-minute one, but it had layers, it had differences, and I actually really enjoyed it. I actually do think that this film had a lot of complexities with the villain, and so to do it in 2 parts made so much sense, and I'm actually really glad that they're doing it in 2 parts. I'm excited to see where the next one goes. I hope they include the entity a little bit more and have a little bit more secrecy, and I genuinely think there's a lot of possibility for this whole AI villain, and it's very topical and current, which I love. I think it works brilliantly. Overall, I had a lot of fun with the Mission Impossible film, and I think you should definitely go see it. If you have seen it, let me know what you thought in the comments, and I will see you next time on The Film Club.